It was fall 2009. It was the first year of the Obama presidency. And Secretary Hillary Clinton was coming to Lahore, and we were really excited. We were the US consulate in Lahore, and a consulate's like a branch office of an embassy. So the embassy was in Islamabad, the capital city. The consulate was in Lahore, Pakistan's second biggest city, and I'd arrived about 6 weeks earlier, and I was like the branch office manager. I was in charge of Consulate Lahore. And Lahore, Consulate Lahore was about 200 employees, Americans and Pakistanis, and we did things like report on political and economic developments in a province which, if it was its own country, would be the 11th largest economy in the world. We reported on the cultural developments and had education exchanges with people in the city that had more universities than the rest of Pakistan combined. We had lots and lots of fabric designers and fashion designers and movie openings and American fast food franchises, and it was such a fun place to be. And we also had some security issues. There had been more complex, multi-casualty terrorist attacks in Lahore than Islamabad and Karachi combined in 2009. And so there were 400 contract security guards and seconded Punjab police officers to protect the 200 of us who were there to enjoy the good parts of being in Lahore. And the visit of somebody as famous and popular as Secretary Clinton meant that we were going to be able to ramp up all the work that we did to develop the bilateral relationship, but it also meant that those security issues were going to be ramped up because it was hard to imagine a higher value target. So when the embassy asked us to put forward some ideas for what the secretary could do while she was in Lahore for about 6 hours, we sent out like 3 days worth of stuff. There were so many things to do: World Heritage Sites, the heads of Pakistan's 3 major political parties, academics, artists, lots and lots of people. And the embassy came back to us and said, well, that's great, but we need you to add this Sufi shrine. And I hadn't heard about the Sufi shrine. I hadn't been there yet. But I talked to my team, and my security officer said, we don't want to do that shrine. That's on our no-go list. So our security officer pretty much let us go everywhere we wanted to go, and as long as we were careful, but there were about a dozen places on the no-go list because we considered them too dangerous to go to. So we looked at a few more Sufi shrines and sent those up to the embassy as alternatives. And they came back and said, no, this Sufi shrine is the shrine you need to take her to. So the security team went out and checked it out and came back and said, no, we really can't do that. And so I sent a message up to the embassy and say, no, we really can't do that one. But we've got all these other great things. And I got a call from my predecessor, who'd been in Lahore for 3 years and was now at the embassy. And he said, stop fighting this. You need to be a team player, and you need to make this effing visit happen. Only he used the real F-bomb because we were not being recorded for public radio. So, I mean, I'm the new girl. I want to be a team player. And so I tell my security team, I got to go look at the shrine. We got to see if we can't figure out how to do this. And I'm not a security expert, but I've been to Afghanistan twice. I did two-year tours there. I had training before each of those tours, and I had training before I came to Lahore. So I had some sense of what we needed to do. I knew that the benefits of this shrine were that it was over 1,000 years old, it was extremely popular, and it represented a very inclusive, loving sort of Islam that was in very strong contrast to the Taliban. And there were groups loosely known as the Pakistani Taliban who were active in Pakistan. So I understood the benefits of a visit to a shrine like that. But we had to weigh that against the risks. And so when we drove up to the shrine, I could see immediately what our concerns were, because there was an 8-lane highway basically going right in front of the shrine, and there were trucks and donkey carts and ox carts and the occasional camel and hundreds of motorcycles and cars, and they were right in front of this shrine where anybody could stop and frankly attack it. And so that was a problem. And then I look up, and there are buildings overlooking the shrine on 3 sides, and there are dozens of windows for offices and apartments, and anybody looking down into that shrine would be able to shoot like proverbial fish in the barrel. So this was a problem. We walk into the, and we come and we can see this staircase that goes down 3 layers, and there's an underground parking garage that's filled with hulks and dusty vehicles and shiny vehicles, and there's all sorts of traffic in and out of it, which also could be very problematic during a secretarial visit. And to cap it off, if these physical vulnerabilities weren't bad enough, the custodian of the shrine tells us that up until about 3 weeks earlier, they'd had spiritual music called Qawwali every Thursday night for 1,000 years. And pilgrims came from all over India and Pakistan to hear this music and to soak in the spirituality of this fantastic building. But he'd received a letter from the Pakistani Taliban telling him that music was heretical, and they would allow them to continue their charitable works, like the soup kitchen and the prayers, but they had to stop the music. And if they didn't, they would attack the shrine, and they were watching them to make sure they didn't do anything against Allah. We left in a hurry. Seeing my security team so nervous. So we knew there were benefits, but there were also some pretty substantial security risks. And so our third step was to see what we could do to mitigate it. So we go to the Punjab police. And the police are in good terms with us because we've got about 200 of them who are protecting our facilities and our people, and we've got a great working relationship. And we talk through every other step of the visit of the secretary, and they're fine with the university visit, the business people roundtable, the visit out to the farm of a former prime minister, but this shrine, what could they do to mitigate those risks? Could they close the street, even just a few lanes of it? No, absolutely not. They'd closed 1 gate and 1 lane of traffic for the Lahore Marathon a few years earlier, and there had been riots so severe that they'd had to use tear gas to calm things down again. And with respect to the issues up above and the issues down below, could they clear any of that out? No, absolutely not. They had neither the authority nor the staffing to be able to clear dozens of offices and hundreds of vehicle hulks from around the shrine. And yes, they had heard that the shrine was being watched by the Pakistani Taliban. And since they had lost about a dozen police officers at a training facility that had been attacked by the Pakistan a couple weeks earlier, they had no interest in taking a high-value VIP, who would be a high-value target, to the shrine under this watch. So we left in a pretty grim mood. And my team, the advanced team from the secretary's staff, we had started calling this venerable Sufi shrine the Shrine of Death, because we were convinced that if we'd followed the embassy's instructions, somebody was gonna die. So I went to bed that night trying to figure out what we were gonna do to make this happen. I wanted to be a team player. I was new to the job, but this just seemed insurmountable. And I finally went to sleep, but about 3 a.m., I sat up in bed and decided this isn't about being a good girl. This is about doing the job preserving our relationships with Pakistan, keeping the Secretary of State, and I was not going to carry out the visit to this effing shrine. So I got up and I wrote an email to my bosses at the embassy and set out great detail why it was that we were not going to do this. I forwarded that email to a couple of friends of mine and said, hey, if anything happens in Lahore and I'm not here to talk about it, make sure that people know about this happening. I met with my team leaders the next day and said, okay, we are not going to make this happen. And we started shoving sticks through the spokes of this visit every way that we could think of to get the message out to the people up the cultural reporting chain, the political reporting chain, the security reporting chain, that this visit had to stop. And Tuesday night, which was 2 days before the Secretary's arrival on Thursday morning, I got a call from my boss at the embassy. And he said, I understand you're having some difficulty with the shrine. I said, yeah, we're having some difficulty with the shrine. He said, don't worry. I'll talk to the Ministry of Interior and he'll make the police support the visit to the shrine. Jerry, I don't think that's gonna do it. But he's like, it'll be fine. And then we had radio silence from the embassy because Wednesday is when the Secretary arrived in Islamabad, and I knew that they would be completely consumed by her visit and everything they were doing with her that day. And so when we went into the Wednesday night countdown meeting, which was the last time we would all be together before we went our separate ways to support the Secretary's arrival the next morning, and the first stop at the Shrine of Death. And it was a very grim mood because although everything else was going great, everybody on the team knew that this was a problem. And so we took the traditional team photo of everybody waiting for the visit. And then my secretary came running down the hall from my office and said, the DCM's on the phone. You've got to come take this call. And so I go down, and it's Jerry who'd been speaking to his buddy, the Minister of Interior, and he said, Carmela, I don't know how to break this news to you. I've just spoken to the Secretary's Chief of Staff, and they want to cancel the visit to the shrine in Lahore. And I'm so sorry, because I know you've put so much work into that. And I don't know what to say. But she'll arrive an hour later and the rest of the visit's fine. And I hope you'll be okay with that. And I said, Jerry, I'll figure out a way to explain it to the team. And I went running down the hall, and they could tell from the look on my face that that problem had been solved. And Secretary Clinton was coming to Lahore, and we were so excited